US President Joe Biden's fitness to serve a second term has been a top story since his faltering performance in last month's debate across Donald Trump, where he sometimes struggled to complete or articulate his own thoughts under pressure. Now, even members of his own party are asking him to withdraw from the race. However, Biden has rejected these claims. He even recently declined to undergo an independent neurological assessment and suggested that the only thing that might persuade him that he could lose to Trump is if the Almighty came and told him so. Hi, my name is Sukanya Saha and you're watching Hindustan Times. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Mukesh Aghi, the President and CEO of US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Dr. Aghi plays a pivotal role in fostering trade and strengthening the relationship between US and India. With over 20 years of experience in driving global business expansion, increasing revenue and boosting margins across various sectors, Dr. Aghi brings a wealth of knowledge and insight to our discussion today. Hi, Dr. Aghi. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
So given the concerns about US President Joe Biden's mental health and equity, Dr. Aghi, do you think he can be replaced? If not, do you think he could be replaced as the nominee, considering many reports suggest the Democrats are looking forward to Harris?
So I think you have to understand the current poll numbers show that if President Biden runs, he will lose to Trump. More important is, will that impact the House, the Senate, and other races? It'll have an impact. So I think the turmoil in Democratic Party at the moment is we need to find a replacement while President Biden thinks he can still win. So there is a lot of stress point taking place within the party itself. There are candidates like Gavin Newsom, there are candidates like Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan, there are other candidates coming in like Pritzker from Illinois. So I think we'll see what happens in the next week or two.
Who do you think is currently leading the polls, Trump or Biden? And what factors do you believe are most influencing voter preferences currently in the stage of election?
Well, hands down, Trump is leading. Absolutely no doubt about that. I think voters want a president who is cohesive, coherent, and who can communicate with strength, because you have a job which is a very difficult job, and they are concerned about Biden's age, his cognitive ability also. So I think there will be some changes depending on what time, where it is going to happen.
So what is the general sentiment among the American public regarding the upcoming elections? Do you think, are there any particular issues that are driving voter engagement this year?
Well, I think there are multiple issues. While the economy is doing well, unemployment is to 4.1%, which is almost a full employment.
Right.
I think the challenges are on the inflation side. Food inflation is very high. Illegal immigration is very high. And that's where the concern is. Those are the key factors which are going to decide as to who the president also becomes.
So how do you think the election results will impact US-India relations, particularly in terms of economic and strategic partnerships?
Well, there are two ways to look at it.
Yeah.
One is when you look at President Biden, he has taken a very structural approach to India, making sure technology transfer happens, making sure that India is part of the process in containing China itself.
Correct.
And with President Trump, when he was the president, approach was very transactional. It was whimsical. And so what really happens is that both have different style. Now, from a substance perspective, I don't think things are going to change because geopolitically, US, India are aligned. They're aligned in the Quad in the Pacific Ocean. They're aligned in the U2 in the Middle East itself. They focus on IMAC, which is the corridor from India to Europe itself. So I think geopolitical things will not change. So regardless of Trump comes back or Biden comes back, you will not see a substantive change in the relationship.
So if former President Donald Trump is re-elected, do you see any enhancement in business ties between US and India, given his previous administration policies?
Well, I think what we see is he will get very aggressive on China, on tariffs, and China will get aggressive on US businesses in China. They will look for places to manufacture more. So that's where India becomes a critical point for these companies to have securing the supply chain. So we will see a much more large number of US companies moving into India to set up industrial base itself so they can supply the customer globally. So yes, the business will go up. Today it's $200 billion. We expect this to go to $500 billion.
So both Biden and Trump have taken strong stances against China. How might their respective policies impact US-China relationships and subsequently affect India, given the strategic importance of the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, you have to understand, you have a country, which is China, which has taken a very aggressive posture on the international order. It has taken a very aggressive posture with its neighbors. It has 13 neighbors. With every neighbor, it has a territorial dispute. India has seen that. It has a 3,000-kilometer border with China, troops on both sides, on red alert all the time. So there's a lot of stress point. So I think from that perspective, India needs US to help manage China, and US needs India to help manage China, because you have to understand, for the first time after Second World War, you have a nation which is economically powerful, technologically powerful, militarily powerful, and it has a market which can be self-sustaining. So I think we need a partnership with the US to make sure that we're able to manage China in a very cohesive, coherent, and peaceful way.
So what are the key foreign policy differences between Biden and Trump? And how might these differences affect global issues such as the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the Gaza war, etc.?
Well, both are very different. You know, you have President Biden, who is focused on building alliances, partnership, enhancing NATO, making sure that supplies to Ukraine from NATO goes up, working with Indo-Pacific region, make sure the Quad is successful itself, building another alliances in I2U2 on the Middle East part, making sure that you're able to get Saudis recognize Israel and Israel is able to commit to a Palestinian state itself. So I think with President Trump coming in, you will see less financial support for Ukraine. He's going to put a lot of pressure on Ukraine to make a deal with Russia itself. You will see the Quad basically in the same position itself, but the stress point is going to be China.
Right.
Because I think you will see a much more aggressive posture by President Trump on China, and that's where you will see a little more turbulence, at least first 12 months before things settle down.
Right.
So I think a different style, a different approach, and different commitments to the global order.
So how might the outcome of the US election influence the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the future of the conflict? Considering Trump calls Zelensky the greatest salesman ever, who every time comes to the US walks home with $60 billion.
Well, I think from Trump's perspective, Ukraine war is not his dog in the fight here, in the sense of saying, hey, why do I have to spend $175 billion supporting Ukraine and basically fighting a war which is going nowhere itself? It has no benefit to the US. Correct. So that's how he sees pluses and minuses in Ukraine war. I can take that money, balance the budget, provide more infrastructure, or give better tax breaks to the corporate America itself. So I think you will see slow down on commitment from Trump to Ukraine on his funding into the war with Russia itself.
Right.
Now, as far as NATO goes, I think US has no choice but to sustain NATO. But it is going to put a lot of pressure on Germany and other countries which are spending less than 2% of their GDP on defense. And it's going to push very hard to make sure that the spending goes up and US contribution comes down less and less. So I think you'll see a massive shift taking place in the Ukraine war and on the NATO commitment also.
So do you anticipate any shifts in US policy towards Israel and Palestine, depending on who wins, considering that the Netanyahu government actually wants Trump back? And do you think we'll get a two-state solution?
Well, I think the positioning, if you look at what Trump did, he is the one who moved the US embassy into Jerusalem. He's the one who basically got the Abraham Accord going, peace between Israel and UAE and other Arab countries in the census recognition of Israel itself. So I think what I see it is basically Trump pressuring Saudis to make a deal with Israel. Trump going to basically go aggressively on Iran itself to make sure it's no longer a troublemaker from that perspective. Will he commit to two-state solution? We don't know. I think that time will tell.
Right.
But overall, the world, and then 50 countries have recognized Palestine as a state itself. So we think that U.S. has no choice but to go in that direction.
So how do you see U.S.'s defense and security policies evolving post-election, and what implications could this have for India's security landscape?
I think the way we see things is America first position from Trump. That means he's going to be inward looking.
Yeah.
He will say, I don't care for the rest of the world itself. I don't need to spend money to defend Japan or South Korea from North Korea. And so I think that's where we have to work with the US to make sure at least a technology partnership is sustained. We need to work with the US to make sure we're able to provide an industrial base to US companies so they can manufacture weapons in India to be able to supply to US armed forces itself. We need to work with Trump to make sure that we're able to provide more cheaper drugs to US citizens which is affordable and quality drugs itself. So I think from that perspective, the relationship will continue. I think it'll get enhanced both from a supply chain, either in the medical field or in the defense field. So I see the relationship moving forward. I think the challenge is going to be is how do you basically manage perception? And the perception is, for example, we had a NATO summit. You had Russians knocking off Children's Cancer Center itself. And then you have pictures of Prime Minister Modi hugging Putin itself. So I think we need to manage those things. Yes, India's positioning as a strategic autonomy is important, but I think perception also needs to be managed here.
So what reforms, according to you, can the Indian government take to attract more global companies, particularly US investors?
I think it's important to understand that India is going to become it's a $4 trillion economy. By 2027, it will become a $5 trillion economy. And long-term vision is by 2047, it will be a $30 trillion economy.
Yeah.
So I think that's a market opportunity for global companies to look at India. But more important is we need FDI coming in. We need technology coming in, because the biggest challenge this government has and the country has is job creation. If we don't create jobs, the youth will be basically unsettled, and you have pressure on the society to manage them. So I think job creation becomes number one objective of this government. We need to make sure that the multinational coming into the country are dealing with a very stable, transparent policy making, and making sure the processes are very simple. Today, when we look at, for example, KYC for companies, they're different by the RBI, by the regulators. And I think we need to simplify the process. The taxes are complicated. The dispute resolution is long-term. You have to go to the court. We need to be able to figure out a way to settle disputes outside the court also. So I think we need to simplify these processes, because otherwise, if we don't simplify, they will go to Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. Yes, they're smaller countries with a smaller market, but I think you have to understand that if these countries want to come into India, they need to feel that we have a long-term game plan. It's a simple process, and it's a fair process.
Thank you, Dr. Aghi. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Pleasure meeting you, Sukani.
Yes, it was a pleasure meeting you as well.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for watching us. Have a nice rest of the day.